Topical news, Sequel Saturday Orlando just got canceled, or postponed, rather, postponed. Kind of sad, due to the advancing hurricane. So that's always tough with the, yeah, oh, Richie says put up a U. What's this for?
So that's the Hurricane, Miami Hurricanes, right? My alma mater,
Oh,
Miami Hurricanes.
oh, you would think they would have a different, I don't know what the hand gesture would be for a hurricane, maybe the circle rotating sign or something.
So that's for the U, right? So they
Oh,
have the U on the helmets. So
mhm.
that's what the U stands for. Yeah, you would think they'd have like an H or something, but I don't know where the U came from. It's one of the things that just kind of stuck, and then over the years.
Mhm. Yeah, kind of sad. Yeah, so they're canceled, which is tough. I mean, you got to think all these events are run totally by volunteers, with just a community set up mind share, so they all set aside their weekend time, set up food for the event, volunteer presenters that schedule their time to come in. So this is the first, I think, big American one that's been canceled. There was one canceled in the UK, or postponed rather.
Yeah, and it is a really big one. I mean, they do a fantastic job. Sequel Saturday Orlando is by far the best Sequel Saturday I've run I've ever been to. They're like clockwork. They're the first ones that ever had a Sequel Saturday. Sequel Saturday 1 was held in Orlando, so they know what they're doing. They're talking about next year while the current Sequel Saturday Orlando is still going on. So they are way in advance. They know exactly what they're doing. This must have been a really rough decision for them to make.
Mhm. How many volunteers does it take to put on something like that when you look at a big city Sequel Saturday?
A lot.
I'm guessing
So
dozens.
yeah, I think
How many attendants do they have?
they've got 4 people mainly that are just kind of driving the whole thing, and then they have volunteers all around that has their own separate areas to coordinate and all that. They get about 500, I would
Wow,
say, 4 to
that's a good chunk.
500. So
It's
it's something
incredible
like that. It's a decent size.
when you think about putting on a venue. I mean, just even how do you pick the venue and find something where you can bring in 500, 600 people, have them all crush in all at once and disappear the next day? That's a lot of prep. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
All right.
it's the same venue that they have for Orlando Code Camp. It's a community college that they go and invade. Essentially, that's exactly what they do, and they've got tons of classrooms, tons of different level of presenters and whatnot. So they've got a bunch of people coming in and giving great presentations, and they've got plenty of places to put them because it's a community college.
So we'll go ahead and get started. We got a couple of early questions, or not really questions, but comments from folks. One person says, thank you for the set SPN answer last week. Robert Davis's blog post, Sequel Soldier, was great. Totally agree. I love that myself. Refer back to it all the time. Another person says, last week I asked about parameter sniffing issues, and as you guys suggested, I've applied the update statistics, and it worked for me. Thanks for your help. Awesome. Glad to hear it. It's very cool.
Handy dandy. That'll be $50.
Just hold your credit card up to the screen and Upendra asks, we have 3 critical databases and the total size of them is about 6 terabytes. Would you recommend putting all 3 terabytes or all 3 databases on the same instance, or breaking up in each instance or each database onto its own instance?
Are you virtualized? Because that might change
Ooh.
my answer. If you're virtualized, I'd probably split them up into 3 different virtual machines.
I'd probably split them up either way.
And why? What would be you guys' concerns when you're running databases of that size?
Resource contention,
Mm-hmm.
locking. Well, I mean, not cross data. That would be a concern of mine with the database that size, but not necessarily with keeping them on the same server. Sorry. But yeah, resource contention mostly. One big giant
CPU.
table starts getting one big giant table starts getting read in. Buffer pool gets cleaned out from something else. So all of a sudden, they're just kind of fighting each other. So unless you have terabytes and terabytes of memory to make sure everything is cached that you need, then could be trouble.
I like it in terms of management for backups in CheckDB too. Man, if you're going to do a backup or a restore of a 2 terabyte database, that can be pretty tough. And other people on the same box will feel it at the same time you're running backups or CheckDBs. At this tier, it's likely going to be Enterprise Edition. It's likely going to be SQL Server Enterprise Edition. So it's going to be expensive when you say, I want to break it out to multiple servers. So start with that question around how long can we be down when this box goes down? And if that answer is shorter than your time to restore, like if it would take you 8 hours to restore all these databases, it's time to start thinking about things like clustering or always on high availability. Which leads to a next good question. Is there any good documentation on always-on high availability? And before I let anybody else answer, I just want to give you a gold star for putting a space between always and on. Look at you. I still do always on as all one word myself. Microsoft keeps changing this stuff. So you guys, where do you go to learn about always on high availability stuff?
Well, I mean, when I was learning it back in 2012 and 2013, I actually learned by doing it, just implementing it, starting in the test environment, dev environment, and promoting it through the different environments and working with QA and development, making sure that everything worked properly. I'm not even sure that I referred to any documentation back then. I mean, maybe for some quick help, but I'm a learn by doing type person.
Yeah. How about you, Eric?
Same boat. There is not a lot of great documentation, at least for free, unless you work here. So I would say, learn by doing, and if there's anything you can't figure out, ask a question specifically about that on dba.stack exchange or something to get like a really specific answer, because a lot of the documentation is pretty high level. So it's probably the route I'd take.
I think to some extent that's probably something we all have in common too. When you have to learn new features as they're just coming out, there just isn't good documentation yet. You have to start playing around with betas. When always-on availability groups first came out in 2012, those of us who wanted it had to start playing with it as soon as the alphas and betas were hitting. There wasn't a good books online. You had to go and do. And often I'm the kind of guy who, given the choice between reading about it and actually trying to do it, I'll take, go copy paste me some syntax and start breaking around to see what happens. Richie, I know you've been having to learn stuff like crazy as we've been developing new apps. When you go to learn, what's your style of learning?
So, I don't always go learning things, but it turns out that we have a nice blog called Brent Ozar at ozar.com. Is that too up front? Is that too?
No. No.
I think that we've got, but even before I came work here, I was constantly on not only our blog site, but also I actually picked up a couple of our courses, and I love our courses. I think we are some of the best in the business. I do tend to do a lot of video courses, so the plural sites and even some of the YouTube stuff, because those kind of get to the meat of the matter, and I can kind of passive listen to a lot of those things. And as I'm kind of doing something else, email or whatever, I can kind of grok what's going on. And if I need to go back, I can go back. But that kind of gets you, hey, all I want is enough to get going. And then when I get going, if I run into other problems, then I could do the Stack Overflow or whatever. But I just need to get started. And the stuff on YouTube, but mainly Pluralsight and our site, brentozar.com, has been really helpful.
Yeah, if you're a developer out there in the audience, Pluralsight's a great investment, just the rapidity of how fast they bring out new courses. And it's also interesting that between the crew of us, I think Richie's actually the only one who likes learning via videos or likes learning passively, which is hilarious for me to say because we run a training company that sells videos. I love doing them, and I know that a lot of customers enjoy learning via videos. I don't like watching learning videos at all. They make my skin crawl.
But maybe what it is you don't like other people's videos.
Oh, you know what?
Maybe
That's
because
true.
you found a formula for videos to make the videos the way you like videos.
You're right, because I loved watching Doug's videos. I had such a good time with. Yeah. He had such a good, theatrical kind of quality to him. I can't watch training videos where I don't see the person. If I can't see the person talking, I'm out. I need to see a human being that I can, pay attention to.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that make your video so great, Brent, is that whole interaction. Yeah, the whole song and dance. I can now connect to someone as opposed to this voice kind of out there speaking to me, dropping knowledge. And it's a personal thing. And it's like, oh, you're talking to me as opposed to wonk, 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 wonk.
Yeah.
Charlie Brown's parents teach you SQL Server.
The disembodied voice with like just some quick typing in the background, and then like it's like ongoing monologue where you're like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, stop.
You can hear the guy flush the toilet or someone who wants a beer. You're like, wait a minute, did I just hear that?
He's blowing his nose, and you're like.
If I had $1 every time I emailed Pluralsight, the audio in this course is terrible. I'd have 1 month full of free subscriptions.
So next question we have is, what are you guys' thoughts about running SQL Server on Windows Nano Server? Well, I know we haven't.
I've never heard of it.
Everybody's faces tells the story there. So Windows Nano Server is a really lightweight, stripped-down version of Windows. SQL Server does not work on Windows Nano Server. There's no indication that it ever will. It might. I just have never run into an instance where I've said, oh, I really wish I had less Windows stuff on the SQL Server. It would have made my pains go away. Next up, someone says, how can I find a memory leak in SQL Server? Wow.
Attach a debugger.
Why do you suspect SQL Server has a memory leak?
That's it. And if you're looking at SQL Server always using more and more memory, that's what SQL Server does. If you Google for a sysadmin's guide to SQL Server memory, this is a post I wrote a few years back explaining how SQL Server uses RAM. Next question. SQL Server patches are not visible under Control Panel. I'm assuming that you mean Windows Update. What do you guys do if you don't see SQL Server updates available under Windows Control Panel? What's the reason for that, and how do you go fix it?
I just download it from the Microsoft website, the ones that I'm interested in, service packs, cumulative updates. I like that they're not available in Windows updates. I don't want that stuff just pushed out to my environments.
There was a recent change where they I think, was it for 2016 where it started showing up? Or where
automatically
more than
pushes.
service packs started showing up, cumulative updates and stuff started showing up.
And doesn't SSMS automatically get patched now?
Nobody tells you.
Yes. At least tells you can go download one. I love that.
An update is available, but then there's like no update dialogue internally. It just brings you to a website. You're like, okay, I guess I'm clicking on this.
Update's available. More stuff is broken.
Yes, that's the really bad part, is that you end up with, like the 16.4, the most recent update, came out and broke up alter scripts. So they took it back down, and 2 days later bring out another build. I'm so happy that they're updating Management Studio. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth. I'm just absolutely in love with how much resources SQL Server is getting these days. Speaking of which, Erick, you should announce that you got extra resources in SQL Server. What happened recently?
I got my very own developer, and he fixed a connect item of mine. He addressed a connect item of mine where I complained that DBCC show statistics is an old and clunky and kind of horrible way to get information about your statistics, histograms and whatnot. And it looks like that got fixed somehow. I don't know with what or anything. I don't know if it's a function or if it's a DMV or any of that stuff, but it's out there and on some developers' desktop waiting to be released.
If there's ever been anything,
thank you whoever did that, or whoever's. Maybe it took more than one of you. Maybe I know what. I bet I'm so special that Connor did it himself.
And I bet your name is in the source code. I bet it says this is done in order to make Erick Darling happy.
Love Connor, XOXO.
Bleep you, Erick.
I spent my weekend on.
Yes. So if any of you ever have things that you want to see changed in SQL Server, go to connect.microsoft.com. That's where you can log bugs or requests for enhancement in SQL Server. And they've been better at addressing these. I always used to joke that then they'll ignore you the same way they ignore me. They're actually fixing things. It's fantastic. And things that aren't even necessarily bugs, like Erick's is not even a bug. It's just something would be cool if we would add it.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the first things I ever heard to describe Connect was just like an idea graveyard.
Oh, that's so true.
Like Florida for ideas, they just go there to die.
And drive real slow.
All right.
We should change ours to the Connect
Yes.
area. We should change it to Connect.
Yep. Yep. We'll have to put in some kind of buffer so that it runs really slowly and the search sucks. Next question. I am a SQL Server programmer. How can I move from like a SQL Server developer to become a DBA? I've been working in development for 8 years and I want to become a DBA. Richie, what would you do?
Don't do it. That's why. I don't be on call. What's wrong with you people?
On call is a really good point. A really good point. And I know when we go out and hire people, that's one of the biggest things that I go tout. How would you guys like to never be on call again? And just all of a sudden you can hear the choir singing and the angels.
So my question would be, why do you want to move from development to DBA? If you think it's like a money thing or a career thing, but
usually money, but in order to get the more money, you have to be on call, so it's a double-edged sword. If you can find a DBA job that doesn't have an on-call rotation, then that's like the best.
Then you're working for us. That's how that works.
Yes. If you think that more money sounds attractive, look at what the more money is and think about what could you do if you worked part-time after hours on a schedule that you controlled, especially since you're a developer. If that means building projects, if there's some kind of application that you want to go build, what could you do to monetize that in time windows that you could predict and control instead of being on call and never seeing your family again?
Go ahead. I don't care.
I mean, if you're serious about becoming a DBA, then you need to immerse yourself in DBA topics. I mean, being here is a good way to do that. You need to learn about the hardware. You need to learn about probably take up a huge one of those 800-page SQL books. Probably what's the SQL Server internals. I think that's probably a good place to start, and start learning how everything works internally.
Yeah, the Kalen Delaney books on internals are a great place to start if you want to, become the all-knowing DBA Swami and sit in the lotus position fixing corruption.
And because I have control of the PowerPoint, I'm actually going to dump in a PowerPoint from this week's training classes. So I'm teaching this week about performance tuning, but one of the modules that we start out with, I'm going to go fast forward to the slide that's involved. Okay, right there. So when people say DBA, there's a few different job roles that DBA means. Down the left-hand side, those of you who are listening to the podcast, I just want you to close your eyes. Ideally, you're not driving, but if you are driving, it's been a good life.
YOLO.
Down the left-hand side, you have the life cycle of a database, from designing tables, designing indexes, writing queries. From the bottom up, you have the systems administration part of database work, designing high availability and disaster recovery, installing SQL Server, troubleshooting outages. If you have 8 years worth of development, start from the top of this chart and work down. So go from designing tables, writing queries, then work your way through monitoring performance. I don't expect you to become a great production DBA on the far right-hand column. That's kind of hard, but the job role that might interest you a lot is development DBA. All right, let's see. Let me throw the slide deck back on there and then switch back over to the regularly scheduled slide deck. And let's see what our next question is. Our next question is...
A lot of salaries flying around in that window.
A lot of people are like, money, which I think is generally true. I think a good database administrator can make pretty good money, but it's the on-call, and it's that there's no school for it. That's pretty tricky. Shand says, I'm struggling with the decision on whether or not I should do my backups on my primary replica or my secondary replica. If I've got always-on availability groups, where should I run my backups? We could probably break this into full backups and log backups. For this, I'm going to just turn directly to Tara, our always-on availability groups expert. Fire away.
Expert.
Yes, indeed.
I prefer running them on the primary replica because I know that the primary is up to date with data. Even on a synchronous replica, it may not be up to date. So if you're running backups there, your backups may not have up to date data, and I don't like that. You know, when your RPO and RTO are really, really low, I need to run them on the primary replica. And I don't necessarily see any reason to move them to another server. Backups should not be causing resource issues unless you have severe bottlenecks.
Or
if your bottlenecks are that bad. Yes. I was going to say, if your bottlenecks are that bad, you probably shouldn't have an availability group on there.
Yeah.
Especially since, I mean, you're clearly using Enterprise Edition, which is expensive edition in terms of SQL Server. If you were going to offload the backups to a secondary, that means you have to license it. So at $7,000 US per core, generally the smallest Enterprise Edition box I see is 8 cores. That's $56,000 US of licensing that I would go put on the secondary. Maybe I'd want to go put a few $1,000s worth of hardware on the primary first, rather than spending the money to license that secondary.
RAM is cheap.
RAM is cheap. Khan says, I think someone asked this question before. All right, you lose. Next question. I'd like to ask it again. We decided to upgrade from SQL Server 2008 to SQL Server 2014. Is there a checklist or to-do list before the upgrade? I would break this into 2 parts. Do you guys want to upgrade a SQL Server in place? And then is there any kind of checklist that you would look for as you go do these processes?
I'd like to start with the best practices, the BPA best practices analyzer, just so I can identify if there are any code issues. You know, if your store procedure, if your data access is through store procedures, it can identify if there are any issues. So, you know, the BPA is a great tool to help you just identify problems on, you know, for the things that it checks. It doesn't check for everything. We found an issue where the raise error command that this application had been using was using old syntax, and the BPA in 2014 did not alert us to that issue. So there are things that it's not going to find, but make sure you test things. And I don't know, is the BPA available for 2016 yet? I don't know if I've seen it. I know it wasn't available when it RTM'd.
No, I don't think. I think it's 2014 is the most recent, but yeah, it's still really valuable. There's also a technical upgrade guide if you search for SQL Server 2012 or 2014 technical upgrade guide. But warning, this is like 200, 300 pages worth of stuff. It's a monster. I like the BPA a whole lot better. How about an interesting question? Do you guys have any preferences between temp tables versus table variables, and why?
Boy, do I. So there's a little bit more to that question about if you can create non-clustered indexes on table variables, and the answer is yes in 2014 plus. But you still don't get any statistics on those table variables. You still just get crappy estimates. So in 2014 and up, it's 100 rows. Prior to that, it is 1 row when you select data out of them. When you modify a table variable, it's all serialized. So when it comes to performance, I generally tend to go with temp tables because you can index them, they get statistics, it's a little bit easier for SQL to make good decisions based on that. But if I'm just doing some kind of routine DBA chore and I don't really care, I will use a table variable.
I had a system that had, this was on SQL Server 2005, and the store procedure was using a table variable, and there was only ever 1 row in that table, always. And a lot of times we'll say, you know, the table variables are okay since the statistics are assuming 1 row anyway. We had severe performance issues with it. We were having to recompile it all the time, and a Microsoft engineer had us test whether or not a temp table would resolve it. And I mean, it was night and day, the performance issues, or the performance improvement that occurred here. So I don't use table variables ever, except for like ad hoc in Management Studio when I'm just testing something out, or like Eric said, a DBA type routine.
I never use table variables, ever.
I've never even seen an instance where table variables solved a problem for me. You know, like every time I've ever run into them, they've caused problems for me.
Well,
I think that there was an SSIS package issue that I encountered that I had to switch to a table variable. Yeah, I remember it now. It was a store procedure that had a temp table, and I don't remember what component in SSIS was causing the issue, but I researched it and found using a table variable worked around the issue, and it drove me crazy. It's like, my rule is not to use table variables.
That's horrible.
Good rule.
Another question, do you guys have any plans to do SQL Server seminars or training in India? And no, it's kind of interesting how this works financially. There are big tax implications for doing work in India. I looked into doing this at one point because we were going to have a client in India, and the Indian government was going to make me open up a bank account and prepay taxes on things, and that I would only get them back a year later. And I'm like, nah, you know what? Between the travel and all of that, I'm good, thanks. So just
That's
our online
wild.
stuff. Yeah. South Africa was a similar kind of deal, was really tricky in terms of taxes. Next question, is read committed snapshot isolation helpful if I want to get less locking? Can RCSI help eliminate my blocking issues?
But then it says readers do not block writers. Or is that what he's saying on his system, or?
I think he's kind of asking if, yeah, is that how this works?
You can get a big performance boost. I went on maternity leave on the system I was just talking about on SQL Server 2005, and there was my company ended up signing a very large customer, and performance went into the tank. This was the database had tons and tons of customers in it, and my manager, who's also a SQL Server DBA, not just a pointy head manager, he implemented he implemented RCSI, and it significantly improved performance. Now, it didn't exactly resolve the issue, but it allowed more concurrency, less blocking, and it allowed us to have more time to figure out what was happening, which was bad execution plans, parameter sniffing type stuff. But I came back and I was like, what is this RCSI? I had to learn about it because I was the primary DBA on the system, and he started talking about he's an Oracle DBA and a SQL Server DBA, and he was saying SQL Server finally could compete with Oracle once Microsoft added RCSI to SQL Server. Oracle has had it for a long time.
Well, it's the default in Oracle, not exactly, but
right.
Same principle.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
when I do new databases, it's always RCSI. That's the default for me.
Yeah, I started putting it on the model database. That way, if anybody created a database, it was automatically RCSI.
There are potential gotchas though. You can run into race conditions with your code. If you haven't tested things, if you do like sort of queuing transactions, and for that reason, some people choose snapshot isolation instead, which does the same thing as RCSI, but you have to request it at the query level. And snapshot can also be used for modifications. So if your problem is writers blocking writers, then you can do it there too if you're crazy and have lots of time to.
I think there's really only two super fast buttons in SQL Server that if you push them in the right circumstances, it just makes an unbelievable difference in the SQL Server. RCSI is one of those. My other big one there is forced parameterization. In both cases, neither of these solve everything, but in the exact situation where you're facing those problems, you just push this button and the angel starts singing. Next question, would you guys recommend storing SQL Server data files on solid-state drives that are configured in RAID? Yeah, so absolutely, if you're going to use solid-state drives, really any drive, same thing with magnetic, you want some redundancy there because drives fail, all of them. Solid-state drives, magnetic, you name it.
RAID 0 is not a good choice for anything with SQL Server. There's like some best practice stuff around like, RAID 10 for the write workload stuff like tempdb and log files, and RAID 5 for the read workload stuff like your data files, but generally you need some sort of RAID on there. If you're buying a modern SAN, a lot of them sort of have their own under the covers RAID configuration anyway. Like I know Nimble and some other ones like have their own sort of black magic RAID thing going on, so you might not even have to worry about it.
And the last question we'll take is for Tara. Tara, how can I be an MVP like you?
Well, I mean, a few years ago, it wasn't exactly hard. It just took a lot of your time answering questions on the internet and, you know, getting your post count high to be noticeable to Microsoft, or someone recommending you to Microsoft to be an MVP. These days, though, it's harder. It's a lot of people are losing their MVP. They're not keeping they're not writing blogs. Maybe they're still presenting every now and then at SQL Saturday, but it's not enough anymore. And I don't know that answering questions on forums is enough anymore. Microsoft is changing the program. They want more out of you than just answering questions.
It all has to be about Azure.
Yeah. They do want you to, they would prefer that people start talking about Azure. You'd be an evangelist for it.
Those are fighting words. I've had to deal with Azure all week.
Yes, I would also throw in there that Microsoft runs open MVP days. They're regional in large cities, so Chicago, Seattle. If you can try to put words in with Microsoft people if you know any Microsoft employees, and just ask, is there an MVP Days event coming up? At those events, you get to meet the Microsoft employees, meet other MVPs, and ask them questions directly, and it puts you on their radar. That may help your edge in becoming an MVP. I would also ask just what you want to be an MVP for. What is it that's important to you? And almost all the MVPs that I know, the MVP is kind of a side effect from things that they were doing anyway, that they love helping the community, which is very fulfilling in and of itself. So if you love doing that kind of thing, you'll find becoming an MVP much easier.
Yeah, I would absolutely say, don't try to be an MVP. Try to help the community. Try to get involved in a community. Try to run a user group. Try to start a podcast. Start sharing your information. Start a blog. Once you start doing that, the MVP things will start coming along, as well as all the other good things that come out of sharing your knowledge and information.
It's amazing to watch every time. So October 1st was the last renewal date for MVPs, or the last round of dates. And it was so funny to see so many people on Twitter go, oh my God, I can't believe I got an MVP. I'm so not worthy. This is such an honor and whatnot. Think about that mindset. Maybe there's a reason why these people are like, oh my gosh, I do this for fun, and it turns out that I'm recognized for it. That's amazing.
Yeah, I've already made the decision that if I was ever made an MVP, that nobody's gonna know about it. I'm not gonna tweet it. I'm not gonna do anything. It's just gonna be out there.
So you could be an MVP right now, and we wouldn't know.
Wouldn't know.
I'm gonna go look up in the directory.
You're an MVP to me, Richie.
No, you the real MVP, Eric.
No, man.
You're an MVP to me. Minimum viable product. All right, well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this week, and we will see you next week on Office Hours. Adios, everybody.